Hello and welcome back to Election Time News America. Today is Friday, October 31st, 2025. We're going to be doing something a bit interesting here. We're going to be looking at how bad each state's general gerrymandering is, which is a huge question going into the gerrymandering war, which is something that we are keeping track of and keeping up to date on those odds right now, as well as the plans for each and every state as of right now. And that's going to be the basic question here to figure out who really benefits, in which states is it actually possible to really do something better, and everything else. We're going to be basing everything off of the 2024 maps just to keep things consistent. Things have gotten worse in Missouri, in Texas, likely, very, very likely to in California. Now looking like it might get worse in Virginia, in Florida, in Indiana. It's almost increasing, almost certain. Might get worse in Illinois. So a lot is changing still. We're going to be going off of the 2024 map, this one right here, which is relatively rough, but that's the main thing to note there. Election Time News, your one stop for all things elections and politics related for the three countries of America, Canada, and Australia. I'll speak for all the Substack, Threads, Instagram, and X, as well as our website, election.ne.ws. Link in the description below for news feeds and our latest predictions. We're going to do another overhaul in a bit. Make sure to subscribe if you're not already for content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. Also, remember, there's never a dull moment in politics. So, Days Redistricting app's a phenomenal website here, and we're gonna this is the general breakdown of who has what control and where they are. So split control in quite a few states here. That means that they're likely to be relatively fair maps, even though there's not anything of putting that in place. There's commissions in quite a few states to keep things fair. The only two red states that actually have commissions are Idaho and Montana, as well as Alaska. All the other, which only has one congressional district, so as far as that goes, that doesn't really impact anything that much. And then there's a few surprising ones that are relatively somewhat split control, and then only a few have Democratic control here. And most of those are actually Democratic gerrymanders, but of course we'll be getting to that in a bit. So here is the current map. This is just a colorized split version of the current House delegation. So let's just start off in the Northeast. I'm not necessarily exactly sure how I'm going to be doing this. This is just the electoral vote tally. But we're just going to be going through and talking about how each state adds up. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to be tracking it, but maybe I'll leave something on here instead. So generally, as far as the map goes, I'm still not 100% sure I'm going to do this right now. We're going to be going off of all of this information here, all the most recent ones, and we're going to go in alphabetical order just to keep things easy, simple here, so we can then compare and figure out which one's the most recent. And we'll get into each and every state that in gerrymandered order. We're going to be going through each other. So anyway, I'm kind of repeating myself here, so let's just get into it. So to start off ranking the maps, we're going to start, of course, in Alabama. This is going to be a Republican-controlled state for the most part. This isn't going to be this is going to be somewhat egregious. It was terrible back in the 2020 map. 2022 wasn't as bad, but then the Supreme Court struck it down under the VRA Section 2. But it is still not necessarily that strong here. It's not that bad, honestly. 25-74 for the House vote here. And the Democrats have a little bit over a quarter of the seat, so it's honestly not terrible. Potentially getting a little bit less of the city down here. I forget exactly which city that is. Montgomery. The central part is almost certainly packed in here. These should be split a bit more evenly. But in general, it's not a terrible state. Let me get this. Wrong thing. There we go. That's the real thing I want to do. There we go. And so this is based on a composite vote from 2016 to 2022. And as you can see, these are very, very safe districts here. And so it's not necessarily the best map in the world, but there's definitely worse out there. So this is going to be relatively moderately ranked. I'm actually going to do a system of, let's do of passing grades here, and this will be S, A, B, C, right? So passing grades, and then we have failing grades, which are going to be F and then X. It's actually gonna be backwards here. So it gets worse as it goes down. All right, so this is gonna be a passing grade. This is gonna be it's going to be a C right about in the middle there. It's not necessarily anything insane. It's a bit of a gerrymander, but it was kind of forced to be a bit more fair towards the Democrats. Next up is going to be the state of Arkansas. This one changed a little bit here, but not by anything insane amount. This is a bit of a gerrymander here, believe it or not. It's nothing atrocious. But if we do look at the state of Arkansas, you can see that, it's 18 points there, but not a single seat. There should be at least one for the Democrats here. It is a little bit difficult to draw a seat, but you can just do it with the black belt along the Mississippi and then get right into Little Rock, which is split 3 ways. So this one is, in fact, a gerrymander, considering that there should be one Democratic seat there, which is what we should see here. We're gonna adjust a proportional map here. That's what I think we're gonna do. It should be, and just to start things off, we're gonna clear this. What a fair map should be. 5 to 2 isn't abominable, but this should be 3 to 1. So that's what we should be seeing out of Arkansas. And so with that, this is gonna get a D grade, an F grade there. DF. So this is gonna get a D. It's gonna be fail. As you do A, B, C, D, F, X. So that's going to get a D grade. That's going to, F grade. That's going to fail just because of that splitting Little Rock 3 ways. If we look down, get rid of the partisan lean, show the partisan lean of the precincts, you can see it's pretty cleanly split. Most of it's concentrated in the 2nd district, but it is split 3 ways. So that's pretty rough as far as that goes. Next is going to be the state of Arizona. This is going to be the 2022 congressional map. This is pretty good. They do have a nonpartisan committee here, so that's going to help things a bit. They have a commission. If we look at the vote in 2024, it's a bit towards the Republicans, but that's just because there are competitive districts here that Democrats aren't able to win, and they have strong Republican incumbents. If you look here, for example, this is relatively good. You got a Democrat flipping this district, but that's just because they redrew it, and it did not gain a district. But good year in 2020. It did get a little bit redrawn to Republicans' advantage in 2022, but nothing insane. These were very competitive seats, so either of them could have gone to the Democrats. Instead, they just didn't. So it's a little bit of a Republican beneficiary thing, but what really does raise a little bit of a flag there is the Democrats did better in the popular vote in 2024 than 2022, which is surprising, but their rating on how close they were to flipping the majority actually got worse. So that's a little bit of a negative there. So I'm only really going to be able to give this one a B at best. It's not bad, but it's going to only be able to get a B. And so a fair map here would be 5 to 4. All things considered, and this is going to be on average. Sometimes, if we're going to look at in Maine, we'll just get there. Next up is going to be the state of California, the largest state in the entire country. Again, we are doing the current congressional maps. We're not getting into the Proposition 50 map. That would be a bit complicated. So looking at right here, this is another state with an independent redistricting commission. And the thing about Los Angeles is it is a humongous city with millions of Democrats, but almost a million Republicans. But because of how the precincts are all drawn out, they're all like 90% Democratic, you can not draw a Republican district in Los Angeles. So the Republicans in Los Angeles are kind of just doomed. And they can't really, it wouldn't necessarily be fair to everyone out here to force draw these people here into red districts. So instead, you kind of have to get a balance into the statewide voting. This is why this system's a little bit flawed in some ways. But what you end up seeing is relatively strong performance here across the board. Republicans definitely got a lot more of the vote, but Democrats did flip 3 very close districts. They're holding on in a few more close districts. It would, unfortunately, Republicans would have to get 15 more points in the popular vote in order to get anywhere near here, right? Which is where they should be right now. So that means that its margin error is 15%, but that would mean that they'd actually win the popular vote. So it's a little bit complicated because of how um, Los Angeles is, but it's extremely difficult just with how California is in general. But if it were somehow perfectly fair, that all things considered, if it were perfectly fair, you literally would just do 54, 52 times 0.6. But it doesn't just work like that. So it would probably be closer to about 12 seats for Republicans, 13 seats for Republicans in a good map, and then you'd end up with the rest being for Democrats. So they would still end up benefiting strongly. There's nothing you can do about Los Angeles. But honestly, the Independent Redistricting Commission could have done better, packing together a little bit more here, getting some more, making the 5th District a little bit bluer, 9th and 13th a bit more competitive. The 21st District and 20th could have swapped out a bit to make them more competitive to allow for a red wave here to potentially snap both of them. The 22nd District, there's not really much you can do about that, though, but I'm pretty sure that actually is valid. That's Valadeo's district. Yeah, extremely blue, but still goes red in the House. So again, there's not really much you can do there, but they could have done better. So this is going to be a C grade, right about in the middle. Nothing atrocious, but they could have done better. Next state in the lineup is going to be, I'm going to have to get it moving a bit more. Superseded with minor. So this is going to be the most recent one here, and so what we're looking at on this map, yeah, I'm going to speed things up a little bit. We're not really getting through this fast enough. So this is relatively strong. You end up having some competitive district in there. You actually have a few with Hurd in there as well. Evans ended up losing their seat. 4 safe seats for the Democrats out of the gate isn't necessarily the best, but this is, in fact, a commission. Interesting. Relatively poor job at the commission then, honestly. There should at least be one more. Apparently, this actually is a relatively close district that's about 8 points. Just a strong overperformer in the House. 14 points in the House. Okay, 20 points in the 6th district, which is 17 on the presidential level. 8th district, tilt blue. 4th district is actually very safe red. Boebert is an extreme underperformer, but that's essentially everything as far as that goes. So it's an okay state. It just happens to be not very competitive just because of how strong Pedersen is, how slightly weak Hurd is, and how very weak Boebert is. So it actually ends up looking worse than it actually is. All in all, it should be about 5-3, just because it's closer to 5-3 in its popular vote here than which is right here, narrowly closer to 5-3, just based on how the independent vote would split, than 4-4. But 4-4 would be a perfectly acceptable result. As it is right now, it is fine, but that is going to only be a B grade as far as that goes. Oh yeah, and I'm going to leave this for single district because it feels unfair to give them an automatic S or anything. We're going to slowly fill those in. So next is going to be the state of... What we have next is going to be Connecticut, and this one's actually a rough one. This is a Democratic state that has a slight gerrymander. It's a little bit it's a little bit tough here because you have strong overperformers here. Courtney's pretty okay, Deloro, and that's why they're able to have these in not very blue districts. The 5th district was actually expected to be somewhat competitive, D+7 on the composite, 2016 to 2020. But instead, Hayes ended up winning by almost 7 in a red wave here, so relatively strong there. But if you look at that popular vote, that's 60-40. That should be closer to, in a state with 5, 1-2. One should be 1.5 seats, which means there should be a safe red seat and then a competitive seat that roughly goes 50-50. Instead, you have a D+5 state, which means that this is going to, in fact, be a failing grade here, a D. That's going to be an F grade there. And in a fair map, it would probably be 4-1. It's 60-40. Should be 3-2, actually. I can't math, guys. But, It should be 3-2, interestingly enough. Maybe get a slightly red-leaning district and a mostly safe blue district, just based on how things go. Some of the time you need a bit of a competition in there. But either way, that is going to in fact be a failing grade. And so it's going to move on to the next state of Florida. This one's also rough. It's quite a bit of a gerrymander here as well. It's, yeah, pretty rough here, 8. And these ones are even getting relatively close, just because of how Miami is shifting. But even if you look back in 2014, that was relatively rough as well. This packing district in the 5th. Packing district in the 5th up here as well. Getting these in here. 2018, 2020. Redrew it to be a Republican gerrymander there as well. So it's stayed relatively bad for basically everybody. It ends up being 58-42, and there's 3 seats that Democrats should have that they don't in a state of 28 of them. So that would be probably about 11 to 12 point 12, just 11 to 17. That's 60-40. And so actually it's probably going to be one more for the Democrats because of that gerrymandering factor. I'm going to apply this across the entire country. Because of that gerrymandering factor, there would be more turnout for the party that currently has a very low amount, because quite a few people don't show up to vote because they feel like their vote doesn't count on the House level. So they just don't even bother voting. So for that reason there, I'm going to give it a little bit of a benefit there, but this is absolutely also going to be a failing grade. That's pretty poor. It's not as egregious as Arkansas or Connecticut, but it's still not so bad that I want to give it an F yet. I don't really want to go there quite yet, because there are definitely maps that do fit that grade. Oh, look at that. That's a perfect segue into the state of Georgia, which is going to get an F. This is terrible, and the reason that it is terrible, it's somewhat equal representation, but there is 0 chance that the Democrats are going to flip these seats. The closest Republican seat here is R plus 20. I have to say, this is actually a phenomenal job of gerrymandering. None of these seats are going to go blue or red either. The 2nd district, probably not. It's 12.7. It's nothing insanely blue, but for a state that's even, that's 2 seats that the Democrats should have that they don't. And the closest one is 20 points. I look back at 2016, it was still really bad. And in 2018, even these ones, 23 and 20. The Republicans might want to watch their back in Georgia, but this was also the suburbs. They really don't have as much ground here in the Savannah area. In theory, you'd want these ones to watch out, but that's 30, so that's really pushing it. But anyway, they actually did get very, very close in these 2 districts, so, and then in 2020 they actually flipped them, so then they fixed the map in 2022. But anyway, this is an atrocious map. In actuality, it should be basically flat even on an average election, just because of how close it is in that state. Just a bit thirsty here. Next up is going to be the state of Hawaii. There's nothing they can do here. It is impossible to draw a Republican district in the state of Hawaii. It is because there are so few Republican precincts. And, I mean, Republicans only got 30% of the vote anyway, so there's really not much they can do there. I'm going to really have to just give them an A, just because there's nothing you can really do. And honestly, I think that's one of the more competitive numbers you can get. It's not proportional, but there's nothing you can do. Iowa. This one should be closer than it actually is. This one's pretty bad. It's not that bad. They're relatively competitive, but they're intentionally drawn slightly Republican leaning so that you end up with a difficult enough challenge of de-seating Republican incumbents that it generally doesn't happen, especially not in a red wave year. Now, Miller Meeks almost lost. Even in 2020, you had a Democrat there. In 2018, 3 of the 4 were blue, and actually the Democrats won the House popular vote in Iowa. One last hurrah of the farmers there. But now in 2024, it's pretty close to 50-50, yet Democrats have 0. It should at least be 3-1. And that's in a relatively poor year. Now, unfortunately, because of how few districts Iowa has, Republicans would unfortunately just suck it up in 6.3 and 3.3. There should be one safe blue district, one safe red district, one relatively safe red district, like Hinson's right here, and then a truly competitive district like Miller Meeks. But they should connect these areas in here in order to make a safe blue district. That would truly make it better. And so in a year like 2024, Republicans would easily be able to hold on to their likely seat as well as that competitive seat there as well. So they'd probably be able to hold on in that. In Colorado, just for if we're looking at 2024, Republicans are probably able to pick up that competitive seat there. So for that, we're going to be kind of going off of the House popular vote being R plus 3 or R plus 2.8. So that's the grade there. That is going to be a D. In theory, it's not atrocious. They knew what they were doing, but there are only 4 districts. So it's not like you can A, do an atrocious amount of damage, and B, like you can do all that much anyway. Idaho, they kind of automatically get a pass just because, again, it's a ridiculously red state. 67 to 28. I mean, where are you even going to put a Democratic district? All the Democrats live right on in here, up here, over here, and over here. The closest you can get is like R plus 20. So for that, they do get a passing grade that is completely fair, and they even have a commission. So they tried. So Idaho gets passed. Illinois. Oh my word. Illinois. So, I said I didn't want to put Florida on the same, like, lower than those because there are a few states that you need to just say, no, this is terrible. Illinois is one of them. And so when you look at these districts, they are blatantly connecting these cities. Peoria, Bloomington, Galesburg, Davenport, Rockford. They are so far apart. In theory, and Macomb, in theory, it's nice to connect these urban areas so that they can get someone that portrays their interests together, but at the expense of all of these people in here and in here that are wanting to probably vote more with the 16th district. So connecting Urbana, Decatur, Springfield, St. Louis, same thing. Outer St. Louis, you're intentionally shoving these people together, getting every single vote out of Chicago over here that you can. That is blatantly bad. It is an F. And so if you look at the popular vote in Illinois, 53-47, that's D plus 6. That is extremely close. Yet, now, that doesn't help that 2 of them were, non-contested. If you look at a year where it's not really contested, you have a few Democrats in here. Every single race is contested in Illinois this year in 2022. It's plus 12, so that's a considerable difference, right? And it'd probably be closer to about D plus 8 in actuality if you adjust 2024 for having competition in here, D plus 8, D plus 9. But still, D plus 9 shouldn't have these numbers. That should be closer to, way closer than 14 to 3. It should be maybe, if we look at this, should be 9 to, not necessarily 9 to 8. In a competitive year like 2024, yes, it should be 9 to 8. They did very, very well in the state of Illinois on the House level, and they should be rewarded for that with more House districts. That's how it's supposed to work. After Illinois is going to be the state of Indiana. This one is not the best either. It's not atrocious, but it's not the best either. It's definitely breaking this up too. There's Montgomery County down here, which they're splitting up. There's with Bloomington, they have Anderson, Muncie over here. They have Fort Wayne that they're splitting out of it. There should be a district from here coming down here and getting these suburbs. And that would be a bit more competitive to be able to actually, like Fort Wayne, relatively large, Muncie, Anderson, and the outer regions there, which they're intentionally splitting up. This should be a competitive district on this side of the suburbs that then should be a bit more competitive, so they split it up over the 5th, 4th, and 6th districts. Additionally, they're cutting out Bloomington, which is Montgomery County, which actually is a swing county, and Terre Haute, which is once a Democratic county area. And over here as well, I believe, actually, this is Montgomery, this is Tippecanoe County as well. And it is actually possible to make a district here along the south area, which isn't very fair to people living on the river there, but Evansville, Outer Louisville, and Bloomington into one area. So there's a few options here, but none of this is very fair, and they should actually connect instead of dumping these into a red district, they should connect these guys along with outer Chicago in order to make this a safe blue district so that they're able to South Bend, Gary, all of those areas as well. So there's a lot more that they could be doing in the state of Indiana that they're just choosing not to because they have Republican control and they can do what they want. This is in fact going to fail just because it's blatant enough. That's at least one district that they should have there. So that's going to be 3 to 6, which is still 2/3 of the vote. That's actually not that far off from where it actually is. But it should at least be one more district, and it's so difficult to actually be able to flip any districts. The closest one is 18, which isn't as bad as Georgia. But so yeah, actually no, I am gonna make it just yeah, a D. Okay, yeah, an F. That just an F. Thought for a second I put it in as like an X or something, but no. Next state in the order is going to be the state of Kansas. This one is a bit tough. Now, they did actually have a bit more fair of a map back in like 2018, and the Democrats almost shattered it. Davids is a very strong performer, intentionally drew a redder district, and she still ends up winning by more than 12. She won by 10.8 in 2024. But these are all very intentionally non-competitive, and if you look at this map here, they're intentionally splitting Wichita into multiple different sections. I thought they did. Maybe it's always Wichita's always further south than I think it is. But safe red district, pretty safe red district. They're taking Lawrence over here and Topeka. They're splitting them up. District 3 is actually basically split even for the composite. If you look at the precincts, though, blue area and this entire area should be a safe blue district. Instead, they're intentionally, and that's actually what it basically used to be back in 2018. There used to be a chunk right here, and then this area right here, and the outer suburbs down there, which actually are relatively interesting in how they vote. So this should be, in this election, it would be 3-1. But that is still, in fact, going to be a D grade. That's very poor planning on their part. That I feel like I should actually include D as a fail, just because it's intentionally enough trying to that's going to be a D as well, and that's going to be S tier. So S tier for them, that's fine. I don't think they should get S tier. I think they should. Oh well. So they're egregious. Indiana's rough. Florida is rough, but now I can put them below Connecticut and Arkansas. So there we go. That feels better. So Kansas is going to be just narrowly failing. That's obviously drawing this out. There should be a bar closer over here. And so they're potentially trying to draw David's district out, but I think that might end up backfiring again. Kentucky, this is going to be another fail. Andy Beshear was kind of forced to sign this one in just because of how many Republicans are in the government there, but he did what he could. The 6th district actually only votes R+6, but that's mostly because of Andy Beshear's election. If you exclude that, it's very red, but he actually won this district, as well as doing pretty well in the 5th and 4th. But the 3rd district, being the only safe district in the state, is ridiculous as far as the Democratic vote goes. And so McGarvey by 23, Barr 26 back in 2018. This district was only by 3 versus Amy McGrath, who is now running for Senate again. But then you end up going back to a very red district, and they actually end up drawing it quite a bit worse, so that they end up not actually being able to compete here. So that's the general story in Kentucky. That is going to be a narrow fail grade. They're going to be along with Kansas, and that in actuality should be, in this election, probably be 5-1, but it might be 4-2. I mean, a quarter of the vote, it really is on the fence. I don't know. Just because it's a red wave here, I'll give them the extra district here, but it should be a bit more competitive than that. All right, I do have to pick up the speed again. So Kentucky, next is going to be the state of Louisiana. This one is abominable. They were forced to draw in another Democratic district, which is going to be this entire area over here, the entire Black Belt. They were forced to do that because of Section 2 of the VRA. They have New Orleans and Lapis, and they have Baton Rouge going up to Alexandria and Shreveport. In this district, there's also more black vote up here, but they couldn't really split that and also split that. It would be a bit weird here, so they ended up having to shift this all the way down. I don't know. But they could actually end up including another district there, but this isn't necessarily that bad in all. It's It's not atrocious as it might seem. It's definitely intentionally drawn so that there's not really much competition, but it's pretty well lined up right here. So I, believe it or not, am actually just going to have to straight up say, yeah, it should be 4-2, and this is going to have to get an A. They were forced to redraw it. It is very proportional to the statewide vote. They should draw these districts a bit better, potentially make this one actually a bit more competitive, with making this one a bit more competitive too, because there's black vote along here that could potentially end up voting a bit Democratic here. If you look at that, there's a lot less than I thought. It's probably all on the Mississippi side. So never mind me. Actually, it's a pretty darn good map. Moving on next to the state of Massachusetts. This one actually looks really, really gerrymandered, but it's not. It is very difficult to draw a Republican district in the state of Massachusetts. What you end up having to do is connecting this area, going around Springfield, connecting in this entire middle section, and then cutting through in the Panhandle. And even then, it's only R+1. So in anything close to a blue wave year 2018, it would have been safe blue anyway. Now, they didn't even try. So for that, I am definitely going to give only a B grade, because it's really not anything great, right? Right along with Alabama, they could have done better, but it's not like atrocious. It's actually very, very difficult to draw a Republican district, but if it was a Republican district like that and it wasn't at all a weak candidate, then they would have been able to squeeze that out this year of all years. So they would be able to get another district in there in the state of Massachusetts. So that'd be good for the Republicans. They only got 10% of the vote. But that's actually because independents actually did a lot of competing here. I only see Republicans in 2 districts and then independents in 2. So that's a bit interesting to see. Next up is going to be the state of Maryland, I believe. And so this one's going to be a bit interesting as well. 2022, this one was rejected, probably as a gerrymander of sorts. And so we look at is going to be very, very narrow leaning district here. This one should probably end up being a Republican district instead. Yep, it should. So this is going to end up being, it should be a 2-6 state, 75-25. Especially with this cycle being a bit of a redder year. These are drawn out a bit too much, using 18-21 in those 2 districts. These should be drawn into a red district out here, and then a blue district more in the middle around Baltimore, potentially getting some Republican areas around here, get Frederick in that blue district. But anyway, that's going to be a C, honestly. Actually, I'm going to disable. Go ahead and disable all of these, because none of these are really... No, not disable them, because we're counting them for the... No, this is the map for that. So yeah, go ahead and disable these. Because again, we can't really fairly grade them because they only have 1 district. So I'm actually just gonna change the name back. So obviously you can't really do any with only 1 district each. Maryland, relatively poor. After Maryland, we're going to have the state of Maine. This one, again, looks gerrymandered. Oh, there's no Republicans in the entire New England area, where Jared Golden is a strong overperformer. He's just a good candidate. It's an R+11 district. He just wins. So that's not any fault of the Republicans. That should stay as is. It is a very good map. It completely passes the check. That is a good map as far as things go. This is D+13, and that is R+11. That is almost perfect for a D+8 state. So phenomenal work. Split Control came out doing relatively well. And so that is, in fact, the story of Maine. Maybe quite a bit surprising, but that is actually going to have an A grade right there. There's not really much to say about that. It's just that Jared Golden's a good candidate, but as soon as he leaves, it's going to flip red. So 2022, Michigan. What we have here is a bipartisan committee. 4 and 3 are almost equals to each other. Competitive districts. The 10th, somewhat competitive, but you end up having a strong incumbent in there, and John James, who's now retiring. These two are competitive. This is relatively competitive. This is relatively competitive. This is a phenomenal map. And so we're just going to give this one an S tier right there. I feel like you kind of have to drop these guys down a bit, just because this is a very well done map, and very well done map. And so with that, it's drawn how you should want a map to be. Relatively competitive. You have, so those voices are going to matter a lot. You have those outer regions, a lot of competitive seats across the state. So it's just a good map, and so that's actually a win for a commission right there. It's going to be in the state of Michigan. Strong state this time around. Probably 7-6 would be roughly fair. Potentially a bit more, but that's what we ended up with this time. So that just shows that that map works. Next up is going to be the state of, I believe it's going to be Minnesota next. Minnesota, yes, 2022. You know what, I'm just going to start opening these in it. No, I can't. All right, that's cool. I'm just going to open them in a new tab so I don't have to go back every single time. But we can't. So relatively competitive districts. It didn't mean to do that. Competitive districts, only R+5 and R+4. But very strong incumbents here. 16 and 17. Once upon a time, Tim Walz held this seat. And then he ran for governor in 2018 and it flipped narrowly. And it has stayed with the Republicans since, but that's really going to be the main story here. It's not very competitive. They should shake this up and redraw it so that's competitive. Both parties, this is the bad story. Both parties got together and said, "Do you want to compete over House races? No. Do you guys? No. Neither do we." So they basically just drew in safe districts for everybody. So that's a poor management right there, and that's not what you want to see from the parties and what they end up doing. But it's what they do anyways. It's not a bad map, though. It's not unfair, so I am going to give this a B grade. It's representative, but it's not competitive like it should be. So I'm actually drop this down to a B. Colorado's okay. Arizona dropped down to a B. Yeah. Okay, there we go. And actually, I have no notes on Maine, really. Yeah, so next we're going to be going on to the state, I believe, Minnesota is then going to be the state of Missouri. 2022, what we have here in 2022 is going to be a somewhat rough map. It's obviously not the worst, but the second district here is intentionally splitting up some of these votes on the outside of St. Louis here. That's relatively competitive area. There should be a stripe district right here, which actually wouldn't be against the rules because they're splitting it. And they're also splitting Columbia evenly and forcing Kansas City into its own district. That's relatively poor there. There's also outer regions right there, which should be its own district. So, well, it necessarily can't really be, but you could have two districts right here relatively easily. Both of those could be competitive, which would be phenomenal. This should be a bit closer of a state than it actually is. Should be at least one more district to the Democrats, so that should be 3-5 in the popular vote. This is going to be a D grade, or C grade. That's barely passing. You're not really. The new map is in fact going to be a F grade or a D grade. That's going to be a D grade. The new map is going to be a D grade, but we're doing the 2024 maps. So actually, the new map's probably an F grade. Honestly, it's proportional to how much there are there. Mississippi. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, it's relatively proportional to the state, but there's also no competition in the third district. If you look at a year that there was competition, now it's 35-64. That's relatively right in the middle. There should be a bit more competitiveness right there, but that should mean that if in a red year, it would be benefiting down to 3-1. So as far as the breakdown goes, 3-1 makes sense. But in actuality, as far as the actual drawing of the districts goes, it's very packing, and there's Democrats all across here in the Black Belt across the South that should be included. It's very, very difficult, but you can draw two blue districts here. But there should at least be a blue district over here, and then maybe a competitive district. That would make things a bit better. but there's definitely worse out there. This is going to be another C grade. It's okay. They should definitely try for better, but that is going to, in fact, going to be that grade as far as that goes. Montana, not that bad. It's pretty good. You got a relatively competitive. I don't even think I need to open the thing. It's relatively simple. You got a pretty competitive district there, 3.2%. And then actually ended up winning by 7.7, a bit less competitive. I mean, the popular vote compacted quite a bit, but that was also because, Rosendale had a lot less interesting competition over there. You actually had Buchanan getting so much of the vote and it being 10% of the statewide vote. But anyway, that's pretty close to 50-50, though. It should be a bit more competitive, but in a year like this, it'd probably end up being 2-0. This is a pretty good map. I'm going to rate it along with Idaho. At going to be now 2024 North Carolina. This is one of the GOP's best projects that they have had, and notice how there's not a single district on here that is dark red. 17, 13, 14, 17, 9, 13, 15, 15, 15, 10. D plus 30, D plus 50, D plus 50, D plus 3. I don't really think I even need to explain myself that much on North Carolina. This state, 53-43. 2022 was phenomenal. This is an A map. The court struck it down. This is an A map right here. Jackson should be drawn to a slightly more competitive district. This should be a bit more centralized, including a bit less of the suburbs, so that they're actually able to be, the outer suburbs are able to be in a more red district, though. Interestingly enough, though, but that should be a bit more competitive district. This is a relatively good competitive district, and these are all beautiful competitive districts. This is atrocious. This is atrocious. This is perfectly drawn so that the closest seat is 13.5. That's going to be Edwards. But other than that, every single other seat is 16 or more, and the 54 seat is, there's no Democrat. So 38, that's against no Democrat. So all of the seats are from 16 to 20 points. That is amazingly drawn that way, but that's not how it should be. It should be 7-7 in a 50-50 state. Honestly, a beautiful gerrymander, but an absolutely atrocious proportional state. Absolute X grade right there for the state of North Carolina. After North Carolina, oh boy, we're at 43 minutes. I didn't think it'd take this long. Nebraska's not that bad. There is a competitive district right here that's going to be about 1. That'll end up basically balancing it out. It should be a bit more competitive. Flood's district will be a bit more competitive, but there's it's actually very difficult to draw a district just because of where the cities are. So honestly, all in all, it would probably be about 3-0 in a relatively good year. And this is actually a pretty good map. I barely have any comments about it. You could probably improve it a bit more just because of where these things are drawn at. It's intentionally just shoved over here, and then including just barely like the northern part of the city of Lancaster County, but it's actually a lot more difficult to draw a blue district in there than you might think. I have done a lot of time drawing these maps, so that is going to be it for Nebraska. New Hampshire, this is actually a very evenly split map. For the composite, it's actually quite a bit redder in the first district than the second. The only reason these are red is because of the gubernatorial results. But on the presidential level, these are basically like both D plus 4, and the state is about D plus 4. So it's a very, very even map. So honestly, it is phenomenal. It is very competitive. You might want to potentially make one a bit more blue and one a bit more red, just so that Republicans can get a bit more of a chance. Goodland only won by just under 6 points. Papa's won by 8. This will be a bit more competitive of a seat, I bet, than the second district coming up, considering that Papa's retired to run for Senate. But it's 53-46. That's D plus 7. And so that I really don't have many notes there. It's not that terrible. Ideally, in a red wave year, it should be at least 1-1, right, in a state like that. But it's actually better to have competition than just because you also have incumbents. In actuality, you would have 2-2. even in a year like 2024, just because it's better to have competitiveness than one safe district, believe it or not. Competitiveness means that you actually have to push for better candidates. So that's, again, better for the people. We're pushing for democracy in the video. That's generally the entire point here. New Jersey is a bit rough. 7th district, that's Keene's district. It's not atrocious, though, but yeah, there should be 2 more districts for the Republicans. This was a little bit of a jump, but actually not much of one, surprisingly. The last time that was even that blue was 2018, but the Democrats only won it by 7 in 2024. They have some competitive districts in there. It's just, it should probably be, 7-5 most likely. And even then, in a red wave year, maybe 6-6. I don't think it would necessarily, just based on incumbency alone, I think it'd probably be 7-5. It's 9-3. So for that, we're going to give it a D grade. It's, again, difficult because of New York City up here, right? But there's shifts going on in the northern part. So you can kind of squeeze that in over here, cut a little bit of that out, get that into a safe blue district, and have this be a bit of a redder district, or potentially make them a bit more competitive. There's a lot of options. By the way, that's not really how you want to do it. We're skipping all the 1-district states in this list because there's no maps for them, because they are literally 1 district each, and all of them would go to just the party that wins the popular vote. There's really nothing you can do about it. So all those are just default, okay? All right, then we get New Mexico. This one's also a bit rough. There should be a Republican district here. It's about 50-50. In a red wave like this, I think they might still not be able to do it depending on how they draw it, but this is, in fact, actually going to be a failing grade. They had a healthier map back in 2014, 2016. 2018, it flipped. That's just what happens sometimes. 2020, it flips back, but then 2022, they draw it like this. Sigh. Vasquez is a relatively strong candidate. Harrell's actually the one that held the district back in, actually lost the district and then won it back in 2020. And then ran again in 2024. So it's just Vasquez and Harrell in the entire district, apparently, that actually want to run for it. But anyway, it's a poor district drawing. You can tell because, again, there's no safe blue ones, even though there's, and look, they're intentionally splitting Albuquerque and shoving Santa Fe in here, but most of Albuquerque's over here. They're getting Las Cruces, outer Albuquerque in the 2nd district. The 1st district is most of Albuquerque, and then everything over here is going to be in the 3rd. So they're intentionally shoving all of that in 1 district. It should be 2-1 in a fair map scenario. Next up, we're going to be looking at the state of Nevada. This is another pretty atrocious one. This is going to be another failing grade. This is a Democratic gerrymandered state, and this should be 2-2. Instead, it is 3-1. Not that strongly, though. It is starting to crack, but the Democrats, that's actually mostly because of Kidd and Chapman over here, are starting to lose grip. Lee only by 2.7, Titus by 7.5, Horsford by 8.1. It's starting to break, and Democrats do have a general gerrymander across the state. They did okay in 2010, so they were able to control everything as compared to Republicans sweeping everything in 2010. So that is relatively atrocious. It should be 2-2 in a year like this, and so for that, we're going to put that down. 142-133, currently Democrats in the lead, but Republicans still have Texas and Tennessee and South Carolina and Oklahoma left, so, and Ohio. So they still have all the stops left, and New York, which they're going to get a lot more out of than they do currently. Speaking of 2024 congressional in New York, this is also abominable. And so, not really down here. This is relatively good, competitive seats. But up here, they intentionally redrew it. As you look at the map in 2020, that's not good enough. So, 2022, they have this map. This is good. Competitive districts all up this corridor. That is gorgeous. They redraw them so they're a bit bluer. And so, this is going to get a failing grade. This is going to get an F. And so that should be much closer to this. They should actually have undo all those flips in order to have this, which means it should be about 15-11 in the state. And see, look at that, so many more districts out of that than they usually do. That is, in fact, going to be a failing grade and in the state of New York. Next up, we're going to be doing up with the state of Ohio. This is another terrible one. And so this is, in fact, going to be another bad one that they're also going to have to, redraw. But this is another bad one, and it's forcing all these votes in here. These two are relatively competitive, when in fact they should be actually a bit more competitive and pulling a bit more out of the blue district in there. This is, in fact, especially looking at the general vote, there should be at least one more district here. So this is going to be a D grade, and so that actually, a C grade, narrowly passing, just because it is, in fact, by court order. But Republicans kind of keep, like, stalling it and not accepting it. So it should be about 9-6, I think, even. Somewhere in there. At least, yeah, it should be 9-6 in the state of Ohio. 60-40 is relatively close to the vote here. Democrats actually going to be losing a little bit more, but again, red wave here. So if there was a competitive district there, like a closer captor district there, that would probably have flipped. Going a bit faster again because we're starting to get close to an hour on this video, which is pretty ridiculous. Oklahoma 2022 congressional. What we're looking at here is going to be the an atrocious gerrymander here as well. There should be at least one blue district. Yes, it's a very, very, very Republican state, but they're intentionally drawing it out. The Democrats almost got a third of the vote here, and why is it not? Oh, that would be why. They're intentionally drawing out these blue areas. There's a blue area in Oklahoma City. There's a blue area in Tulsa. If you connect those, you can actually make a blue district. Instead, they perfectly split them up. If you look at what happened in 2018, Democrats actually narrowly flipped one. This is expected to be a safe red district. But then they've got Horn out in 2020 and redrew the district. Horn ran in 2024 and lost by 21%. That shouldn't happen for a popular Democrat. So this is going to be should be a 4-1. And is actually going to get a failing grade, interestingly enough, in the state of Oklahoma. That isn't that difficult to actually draw a blue district that spans across there. It would be a bit more competitive more than anything, but they are intentionally, I'm actually going to drop this down to a C. They're intentionally making it that way, but that's kind of just what happens, kind of just playing the game again. How things go. Next is going to be the state of Oregon. I'm going to speed this up a bit. 2022 map. This is relatively poor. This one actually is just a competitive district. That's just how things go. But you look at these two, that's 7 and 8 points. So that's intentionally drawn that way to be a bit more disingenuous. There should be one more seat for Republicans and then a competitive seat as well. I don't necessarily think it should be. I don't think if there was like that, they'd actually end up picking up another seat. So it'd probably end up being 4-2, maybe 3-3 in a really, really good year for the Republicans. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt as far as that goes. I feel like I've given the Democrats benefit of the doubt a bit more. But this is in fact going to be a another C. There's quite a few C's here. But that's really going to be the main thing. I'm actually going to. Now it's actually just straight up states. Because it doesn't make sense. We're not actually ranking how many each loses, so that doesn't really. Alright. Next up, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a split control, and it's actually a relatively fair enough map. It could be better. Oh, I mean, back in like 2016, the map was atrocious, but now it's okay. There's 3 competitive districts. Which have gone basically both ways over the past few years. It's pretty evenly split. It goes back and forth. I mean, that's pretty fair. I'm going to give this one an A rating. It's not quite as beautiful as... Actually, no. I think, honestly, it's almost as good... It's basically as good as Michigan's. I mean, you have people being proportionate here. You have these competitive districts there. You even have the 1st district, which is actually blue-leaning, but there's a very strong Republican there. 17th district, relatively safe in this area. You include the area in Beaver County over here with most of Pittsburgh. You have the safe district there with the suburbs of Pittsburgh in the 17th district, 16th district there. So this is a pretty good map, all in all, and in a good year like this, it would be a narrow Republican control like we have right now. It'd be 9-8 after a strong term for the Republicans. Now, actually, it is 10-7. It's more or less semantics at that point. We're just trying to hypothesize things. So more states pass than fail, interestingly enough. After Pennsylvania, I believe it's Rhode Island, and there's really not much you can do about this. That's just going to be a free A grade for Rhode Island. You cannot draw a Republican district in Rhode Island. The closest you can get is like D+4, and that is going precinct by precinct. So that is a pain in the butt. And so that's really not going to suffice, honestly. South Carolina, atrocious. This absolutely fails. That's going to get an F grade. And this is because there's actually 2 districts that should go to Democrats. This should be 4-2. 4-3. 4-3, actually, in the 60-40, right? And right here you end up with 57-42. That's pretty close. But instead, you end up splitting up these areas in here you end up breaking up Columbia, the capital. You end up cracking Charleston. Actually, you end up shoving all the red stuff over here. That's Nancy Mace's district. Orangeburg. The cities up here that actually have a little bit of blue. Shove them in with enough red around them. I mean, you'd have to literally string them together in order to get a blue district. And even then, you'd have to shove this in here and get some of Columbia. But anyway, it's still atrocious. And so for that, that's absolutely going to get an F grade. Tennessee. F grade. This is another terrible. Actually, no, I'm straight up just go X grade. This is another one of the worst ones in the entire country. And so if we look at the map here, they used to have a district that was around not Nashville, the other one, but now they drew it out, and now it is split 3 ways. There's actually a chance that the Democrats could theoretically end up winning this district. Very, very low chance, but in theory it could end up going that way. But it should be actually 3 for the Democrats and 6 for the Republicans. That's almost perfectly split up for the popular vote. I mean, like 1-1. That is perfect. But no, it is an F grade right there. There's enough Democrats out there. Nashville right there. You unfortunately cannot do anything about Knoxville and Chattanooga. But you could get this into one district right here, and you could get this into one district and have a competitive one right there. I think in a good year like this, it'd probably actually be 2-7. Because it is going to be difficult. It's kind of like the reverse of California. You have tons of Democrats, like a million Democrats out here in total. It's a pretty big state, but not a million. But yeah, that's going to be the difficulty as far as that goes. Texas, atrocious. If we actually look at this, terrible. It's drawn maniacally, pretty much. And the closest district is 14. The next one's 20. The Democrats would have to win in order to actually, the tipping point is 25% in order to win the House in Texas. $25. They'd win the popular vote in Texas by so much. 25.5. They lost it by 18. They'd have to win it by 7. That's more than they should have to. It should be very close to 0. It should be roughly even there. And that's even with this competitive district there. That's in theory competitive. But look at all of this. All of these are safe red. Safe blue. Atrocious. In actuality, what you should be looking at is 58-40. You should actually end up having another district or 2. And then have a few competitive, which Republicans would actually end up having picked up. So it'd probably actually be, 2? But this was a good year for Republicans. They don't usually get that much in the popular vote. Look at 2020, the exact same map. 2018, the Democrats lost the popular vote by 3, and they had the exact same number of districts. The Republicans decided it wasn't enough. They drew themselves another district, and then they ended up going there. So Texas and Illinois have a lot in common as far as this goes, but in actuality, I think it would probably be 14 to 24 in a fair year here, which means the Republicans have now taken the lead in the House for the first time in this video, and they are in fact going to win the House, which is good because that's how it should go. 2022 congressional, this is atrocious, and this is going to be an F. They split Salt Lake City 4 ways. And that is where basically all the Democrats are in the entire state. So, F. In actuality, it should be 1 to 3 in the state of Utah. Then we go to we're almost done. We hit 1 hour, but we're almost done here. 2020, Virginia, we're going to be looking at next is quite a few competitive districts. Pretty good. Commission to draw this pretty well done. It's going to be nothing insane. You got a B grade there. It's an A grade. That's pretty good, but could get a bit more competitive even in this northern seed. Include this area over here because I do believe there's a blue city in there. Yeah, potentially get a little bit there. That's actually not all that red. Get a little bit more competitive. Balance out some of those. I'm not sure what they get rid of, though. You could do a bit of tweaking here and make it a bit more competitive, but overall, it's a pretty darn good map. It's pretty representative of the state as a whole. If you go over to it, that's pretty close. If you look at that, 52, 48, and it's 6 to 5, that's pretty close. Washington, 2022. Oh, I forgot to do this. That's going to be that's going to be 6 to 5. That's going to be pretty good there. Go into Washington and no, nothing yet. Washington is actually okay. It's not that great. But again, you kind of have the issue with Seattle. Perez is a strong candidate, but they could probably fix out Schreier's district along with Newhouse. It's actually very, very red. Yeah, it's pretty red. These two could probably get fixed out a little bit to be a bit more red as well. This is going to be a C grade right in the middle. The Republicans should probably pick up another seat here. That should be 3 seats, 70-30. That's still relatively far off, but you end up having like 68% in that one district. 2 Democrats there. That's going to be pretty difficult to end up fighting against. And then so you end up next is going to be the state of Wisconsin. This is another atrocious one. This is going to straight up just be an F grade. And so what we end up with here is basically just completely drawing this out. I mean, these are intentionally drawn to be not very competitive. The 5th district straight up red. 1st district not that bad, but you end up with a relatively split control, but doesn't mean that it's going to be a fair map, that as we can prove here. Orton's a relatively strong candidate, and so is Stale, but honestly, that doesn't really grant that, Wide only won by 14, Tiffany, but 27, 22, 28. Wide's actually a relatively weak candidate here. Van Orden, Stale, but you should have more competitive districts. That's not what we should end up having here. 4 to 4 in an ideal world, which means that Republicans will end up winning control of the House, and you actually end up with those 2 districts in West Virginia, which means they end up 221, which actually means they end up increasing their House majority by 1. So, just saying. And West Virginia, there's nothing they can really do. You cannot draw a blue district in West Virginia. It is too red. And so this is a perfectly fine map to wrap things up here. It just goes along county lines, believe it or not. If you look at the county lines, it goes right along these county lines. And so they actually were allowed to have a relatively high population error just so that they could go across just so they could follow county lines to keep things together. And both of those are evenly, quote-unquote, competitive, as in R plus 32. So, but that is it. We end up with 27 passing states, 17 failing. And we have 6 states with only 1 district. And so in total, the Republicans actually would gain a district, which means that Democrats, as of right now with this scenario, actually did end up gaining one district in the House on net. But in quite a few other scenarios, I could see Republicans honestly gaining a lot more with Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Those two would have flipped in by one. Ohio, Iowa, I believe, gave Democrats one of them. So, but yeah, all in all, Republicans would actually gain one, which means that it's honestly somewhat fair right now as far as net gains go. But still, it should be a bit more competitive across the country. So always push for these commissions, push for a country that's all green. Thank you all so much for watching. This is a very long video. Thank you if you did watch all the way through. And make sure to subscribe. Make sure to subscribe because we have the election night coming out. The simulation in 4 days and the actual election night live. So make sure to click the notify me button below that. Thank you again and have a fantastic rest of your day.